think God's going to do something this morning. What do you think? Likes to play with my microphone. I wish that I could, for 2 minutes, let you see what I see when I'm praying to God. I wish that I could let you see, because you would look at things differently. So since I can't do that, I can't magically just give you my eyes, I want to tell you what happens when you come to church. I want you to know that it matters. It matters if you're here. And if you're a visitor this morning and you have a regular church, thank you for visiting us, but it matters when you go to church. When you get up and when you get dressed, even if you don't hear a thing that's said, you have weakened the enemy's hold, not just on you, but in the world. And you have strengthened God's kingdom. Just by the mere fact of you dragging yourself out of bed, putting some clothes on, and getting here. So I want to tell you thank you, because I know some of you had some really rough mornings. I know that some of you are going through some really hard times. But the times that you draw closer to God in church, the quicker those times are going to turn to good times. So I just want to tell you thank you for being here this morning. And now Sunday school, you're dismissed. I hope that your week has been good. The one thing that I know that it is good is you survived. You're here this morning. We're not having to visit you in the hospital. We're not having to get information together for a service. So each day that we get to live is one day to make a difference, and it's a gift straight from Him. When Jesus was on the earth, He really shook things up, and I love that. He went against the grain. He went against customs, traditions, and a lot of people thought He had a really poor judge of character, because the people that He chose to follow Him didn't look good on paper. In fact, the resume, they would have just put them in the discard pile. But that gives me hope, because I think there's times that I should have been in the discard pile, but Jesus sees what we don't see. There was actually very few commandments that Jesus gave. They called Him rabbi, which means teacher. And teachers at that time were famous for having big egos, and they wanted just the right group to be their followers. They wanted to look good on the social status. And so they would teach the commandments of God, but then also they would teach whatever commandment that they felt was good, and they would add it to what their followers were supposed to do. Now, His ragamuffin group was aware of this. And when Jesus said, "Follow me," they're like, okay, this is our teacher. We better take some notes. I don't know how many commandments we're going to have. Over there, they got 613. Over there, they got 540. Got 330 over here. How many are we going to have to memorize? But Jesus gave very few commandments. And we're going to talk about one of those commandments today, because if we follow that commandment, that's how He says that people, the world, will know that we're Christians. It's not in the cross that we wear around our neck. Some people wear it because it looks good. They like the shape of it. Other people wear it because they are thankful for the cross. But it's not about the T-shirt. It's not about the Bible that we carry. It's not about how many scriptures that we know. And it's not about how many times we go to church. It's something that we have inside of us that is supposed to speak to the world. I have a dear friend of mine, and I can't tell you how many times she says, well, I was at such and such store, and somebody came up to me and said, "Are you a Christian?" Now, it wasn't because, "Hey, Joel, it's a little warm." Thanks. It wasn't because she had a huge cross. It wasn't because she had the Jesus Saves t-shirt. It wasn't because she was carrying the Bible. It's because there was something about her presence that drew people to her. And she'll say yes. And very often, that conversation turns into, she may have only had this many minutes, But she's there for a long time because somebody says, I need to talk to a Christian. That's what Jesus wants. He wants us to be of the world, but not in the world. What that means is we need to carry ourselves a little bit differently. We need to shine the light in the dark places. What's interesting about Jesus, him being the light of the world, when he walked into a dark environment, strange thing was, he didn't curse the darkness. He just showed up. And when light shows up, darkness has to leave. When you walk into a dark room and you turn the light on, you don't have to still hold the flashlight, do you? Because the darkness was dispersed. That's what he wants us to be able to do as Christians. However, I've been around a lot of Christians that their light is like that interrogation light. You know, you see them where they torture and they shine the light into your eyes and they ask you all these questions. Or they shine the light onto you so much that they see all the flaws and all the imperfections. That's not the light I'm talking about. I'm talking about the light when you were lost in darkness and didn't know the way. That all of a sudden somebody says, hey, follow me. I got the light. I know that direction. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is a commandment that Jesus gave. The title of the sermon is Grace and Truth. That's the perfect combination. I don't want to be lied to, but man, don't mow me over either. Give me a little bit of grace. And we're going to look at a few examples to help drive that home in the Bible. So to be a Christian actually means to be a Christ follower. It also means to be like Jesus. The Christians actually didn't name themselves Christians. They were actually named that and called that and labeled that by pagans and Gentiles. Why? Because after Christ ascended, his disciples walked in the same way that he walked in. They had the same philosophy. They extended the same kind of forgiveness. And they would say, there goes one of those Christ followers, like a Christ Junior, if you will. That became short to Christian. So Christian isn't basically, oh, I believe I got baptized. That's part of it, but that's not the whole story. To be a Christian, Jesus says that we're supposed to be full of grace and truth. He gave one commandment for his disciples. He said, if you follow me, then people will know that you are my followers by your what? Do you guys know that verse at all? It's very important to know it if you are a Christian. How will the world know that we're Christians? Not by the cross. Not by our sermon. Not by our title. By our love. That's how they'll know that we're a Christian, is by our love. I'm not talking about the gooey, sweet, weak, just do anything kind of love. There's such a thing as tough love. But he says if you truly love your brother and you love yourself, you're not going to have to tell somebody I'm a Christian. They're going to know it. They're going to feel it. See, if we love others the way that the world loves, with conditions and judgments, then nobody will want to follow this Jesus. We've had some poor representatives. Have you met any of them? I have. In fact, I had told you guys not too long ago that so many of the Christians that I had met, I decided I wasn't going to be that. Because that was sad, that was boring, that was heavy. They were filled with anger, and they just weren't very nice. But then, I met a true Christian. And this Christian was kind. This Christian didn't judge me, but accepted me. This Christian told me about a God filled with love. The others that I had met told me that I was going to go to hell. So I thought, well, if I'm going to go to hell, I might as well have fun, right? Because I don't want to go to that kind of heaven that they represent. That's not what Jesus wanted us to be. He said, I want them to, when they look at you, I want it to reflect back to me. So that's what he was teaching his disciples, and apparently they did a good job because people kept saying, hey, that's one of those Christ followers. They talk a little bit differently. They act different. They stand out different. So how do we love like Jesus loved, if that's how we're supposed to do it? Well, Jesus loved with grace and truth. It wasn't the perfect balance of grace and truth because he was an individual that knew that individuals needed to be handled differently. If you have more than one child, you know that the one thing that worked on the one child, because you think you got it on your first one, right? I got this. I know how to handle this. Till the second one comes along. You're like, oh, that's not working at all. Why? Because it's a different personality, a different makeup. And Jesus was like that with every person. So it's not this perfect formula that I can give you because you're going to have to pray about it. You're going to have to ask Jesus in this situation, how do I handle this? How do I give them grace, yet give them truth? How do I give them truth, yet give them grace? So we're going to look at just a few samples, but Jesus was known for his love. He was known for his grace. As churches, we have some that are filled with truth. You need a church that has truth, but little grace. Those churches sound more like you're not any good, you're a sinner, you're bad, you got to do better, you'll never be good enough, better be careful, you're going to lose your salvation, you may not make heaven. And while that can be true, you need a little grace, right? Otherwise, you'll never make it. And then you have other churches that will say, oh, you're perfect, just like you are. It's all good. We'll all make it. Just try a little bit to be a little bit better. Neither one of those are healthy churches because it needs to have both grace with truth, and it needs to have truth with grace. That's how Jesus was with people. He always told the truth, but he wrapped it in grace. He wants us Christians to follow his example. So John talks about Jesus, and I've mentioned this before, but he really could be a Hallmark employee writing those cards or the poetry books because he just had a way with words, and he could visually with his words, he could paint a picture into your mind. And people wanted to know God, but they're like, how do I know this God? Well, Jesus came on the scene. And he even said, if you've seen me, you've seen my Father. If you know me, you know my Father. I want to read in John, first chapter, and verse 1. And John is painting a picture here. He says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So what is he saying in that? The visual that I like to use, it's like the heavenly creator was creating a picture. And he's painting a picture, and then he steps out of his reality and into the thing that he created. Do you ever see Mary Poppins? One of my favorite parts is where there's a sidewalk chalk. And the little one wants to go and check out that picture. And so sure enough, they hold hands and they hop right into that picture. Well, God created this masterpiece, this beautiful painting. And then he stepped out of his reality into the picture he painted. But even the characters that he painted, they didn't even know him. They didn't recognize him. So to sum up John chapter 1, he says that the Word began to dwell among us. He came and he pitched his tent right next to us. He walked with us and he talked with us. He became part of the story that he was writing. He's a hands-on God. He wanted to be involved. So he wrapped himself in flesh and he was born as a baby in the Son that we call Jesus. So I want to read, before we go on to the examples that I want to use, I want to read John chapter 1, verses 14 through 17. And it says that the Word became flesh and he dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory. Who is John talking about? John's talking about himself and the disciples. He's saying this is a first-hand eyewitness account. It's not a hearsay. I saw his glory. I saw what he did. I saw the miracles that he performed. I saw him walk on water. I saw him ascend into the clouds. I saw him raise people from the dead. I saw him die, and I saw him resurrected. I saw his glory. See, the Word, it became flesh, and then it dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness of him, and he cried out, saying, "This was he of whom I said, he who comes after me is preferred before me, for he was before me." In other words, he was there when time began. And of his fullness we have all received, and grace for grace. For the law was given through Moses. He's the eye for the eye. The slap them, you slap me. Steal the donkey, steal it back. That's the law, that's Moses. But grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. Who is Jesus? He's full of grace. And he's full of truth. That passage is saying, if you want to know what God is like, then look at me. Look at the love of Jesus, because God was the Word that became flesh. If you want to know the character and personality of God, look at Jesus. It doesn't say that he's the balance of grace and truth, but it says that he's full of grace. He's full of truth. In verse 16, it said grace in place of grace. In other words, grace abundance is who he is. He gives you do-overs. He gives you chance after chance because he knows your heart, because he created your heart. Moses came with the law. That's the way the world thinks. You hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. You slap me, oh, you better bet I'm slapping you. You talked about me, wait till you hear the things I'm going to say about you. That's Moses. Get even with them. You're right, that's justice. But then Jesus came. And with Jesus came grace and truth. So how does it look if we're walking in grace and truth? One of the examples I want to use, familiar story. If you want to read her story, it's found in the book of John in chapter 4. It's the woman at the well. It's a perfect picture of Jesus operating in grace and in truth. Not the balance of it, but the fullness of it. Jesus is talking to the Samaritan woman who has a checkered past, and the way that she's living now, she doesn't have a good reputation. She is also of a belief that goes against the Jews. They were enemies. In fact, if a Samaritan's shadow fell upon you and you were Jewish, you were considered unclean for a while. You went around the town. But where they were going, the town was right in the middle. Disciples, knowing how they feel about them, were ready to go around. But Jesus says, no, let's go through. And then he sent them away to go buy food. I love that. It was now truly a one-on-one encounter with this woman at the well, and they're having a spiritual conversation because she's asking him some questions because of their belief. And he says something to the lines of, go get your husband. And she says, I don't have one. He says, I know. The one you're living with now is not your husband, and you've had 5 before. Jesus went straight to the heart of the matter. He went straight to the thing that was destroying her life, that she was most shameful about. He didn't beat around the bush. He went straight to it. That was truth. It was the most painful reality of her life, and he called it out. But then he says in so many words, you've been looking for water for your soul. In other words, she was looking for someone to fill the emptiness inside. Someone to make her feel better about herself. Her soul was dry. And he says, you've been looking in other words, in all the wrong places for something to quench your soul. That's grace. Grace is understanding where they're coming from, acknowledging where they are, not belittling them, not shying away from the truth, but getting to the heart of the matter. And he says, and even the one that you're with right now is not your husband. But he says, but if you will receive the water that I give, speaking of himself, he says it will quench your soul like no other person could. It's a beautiful picture that he's painting of him being truthful, yet filled with grace. He's showing that he was full of truth and he was full of grace. Why did he call that out again? That was kindness. Because she might have, had it not been addressed, she might have walked away saying, yeah, but I can't partake of that water because you don't know me. You don't know my shame and my guilt. You apparently haven't heard my reputation. So see, he got it out of the way at the very beginning almost. He's like, I know where you're coming from. I know what you're doing. And I know what led you there. Your soul. It was dry. And I can do something about that. You want to know one of the coolest things about that story? I mean, that's pretty cool, right? But something even cooler. She's a Samaritan. He's raised Jewish. They're supposed to be enemies. She's a woman, not a man, not a leader. And do you know that's the first time that he said, oh, and by the way, I'm the Messiah. How cool is that? No wonder she had a message to tell. No wonder she had a story to tell. And yet still today in this world, we have people who will try to shut the mouths of women. He didn't stand on the temples of the synagogue and gather all the religious scribes and Pharisees around and say, okay, guys, I need to tell you who I am. This was the first time that he shared this information. And it was with her. Don't ever, ever let the enemy tell you that you are not good or you are not worthy. Because your Savior, he's full of grace. Yes, he's full of truth, but he's full of grace. Do you know why God hates sin? Because it hurts you. That's the reason. It's not that he's this taskmaster that says you have to live this certain way and you've got to check off this list, so sin can't be allowed. No, he hates sin because it hates you. And it hurts you. And it hurts those that care about you. That's why he hates sin. That's why Jesus hated sin. He says, I know where you are, but I've got some grace and I've got some truth. I don't want to keep your heart from hurting so badly. Oh, it's still going to hurt because we live in a world and it beats. Our heart still beats. But at least if we have a hurt while we're a Christian, there's going to be a reason for it. Jesus, full of grace, full of truth. So in this one, he goes right to the heart of the matter. He calls out the sin. But the next one that we're going to talk about, he handles it completely different, yet he's still full of grace and he's full of truth. I'm going to talk about a tax collector by the name of Matthew. The other name that you'll read in the Bible that refers to him is Levi, but we know him mostly as Matthew. Before he was a follower of Jesus, he was a tax collector. So let me paint the picture for you, because we think, yeah, tax collector, IRS agent, yeah, we don't like them. They're not popular, but, so what? A Jewish tax collector was a slap in the face. What he would do is he would charge you taxes, but then he would add a little, and whatever he added that was extra, he got to keep. So let me put it in terms that maybe we could relate to more. It would be like in World War II, you being a Jew. You being a tax collector, that you went to the Jewish people and you said, you owe us taxes. I'm going to bump up the price. And then I'm going to give it to the Nazis. But I'm going to get rich off of you. That puts it more in context. He was not popular with the Jewish culture. He was the lowest of low. Prostitute tax collector, take the prostitute. She was higher in the rank. Shepherd tax collector, take the shepherd. There was nobody lower, more vile, more hated than a tax collector. And Jesus has a following now. And he has his disciples. And Jesus walks by the tax collector booth where most Jews would have spit. And he says, follow me. The Bible says immediately he followed Jesus. Why? Because his heart told him there was something there. See, he was all about the money, all about the material wealth. He left it. But for a moment, step into the disciples' point of view, would you? What would that conversation be like? Maybe more like, what is he doing? Oh my gosh. Seriously? Maybe he's going to tell him off. Maybe he's going to tell him what he is doing wrong, and he's robbing God's children, and let's lean in, because there's going to be a sermon, man. Let's wait for this one. I'm going to amen this one loud. How about you? Did he just say, follow me? Like, really? Like, I know I wasn't great, but I was a fisherman, so I kind of deserved to be here. But a tax collector, really? Really? Does he not even know? Are we really even following the right guy? A tax collector. And here comes Matthew. Big smile that's not returned. And then it goes from what is he doing to what will people think? Like, we were getting some clout But what are they going to think about us now? They're going to laugh us out of town. But basically, that was more like, what will people think about me being in this group with a leader that has, of all people, a tax collector? What he's saying is true, right? But God's, through Jesus, is giving him grace. And then it gets worse for the disciples. Because Matthew, big mouth Matthew, says, hey, before we take out, let's have a party. And I want you to come to my house. Meaning my house with my friends, which is other tax collectors and all other kinds of scum. And what does Jesus say? Sounds good to me. What are we going to do? Now we're going to be seen at the party. And sure enough, because most of the parties were held outside if you had a large crowd, sure enough, the Pharisees and the Sadducees and all the religious leaders showed up. All right, so surely now Jesus has got a whole room full of sinners. He's going to tell them now, you're scummy, it's bad, give back the money, I know what you did. And instead, he sits down and he begins to joke and laugh with them. He doesn't even address the sin. Right now, he's full grace mode. The sin that he does address is a religious attitude. Isn't that funny? He addresses a religious attitude, but he doesn't address the sin at that moment. It doesn't mean that he condones it, but he means that he accepts them where they are because the timing wasn't right to address it. Oh. So now not only do we have to worry about when to have grace and when to have truth in each individual encounter, we have to learn when to keep our mouth shut about certain things, don't we? Because if you're smart, if you're a good fisherman, you know when the conditions are right to put your pole in because you've studied it. If you're a smart Christian, you're going to know when it's time to open up your mouth and when to keep your mouth closed. See, there's people in my life that within 5 minutes, I don't know how the conversation gets there. It's just I'm bragging on my Heavenly Father. And I'm telling him how good Jesus is and how much I love Jesus. And there's other people that I've had encounters with them at work. It's been 6 months, and I've yet to say a word. Why? Because the water's not right yet. It's not time yet. And if I still stay prayerful on it, because I'll always ask God, now? No. Just love them. Now? No. Just love them. And there will be a day, there will be a time when I'll get to step through that door. But I've shown them truth because they know the way that I live. They've been around me enough. They know my personality and how I interact with certain situations. So they know there's something different, but we haven't got to that part yet. It's the same way if you're a leader of a church. Sometimes there's a sin that you're going to address immediately. But here's what's so strange. The next Sunday, somebody else can come in with the same sin, and you're supposed to show grace and mercy and truth. Grace first. Because why? Because Jesus is a personal Savior. Meaning if we walk in his footsteps, everybody's supposed to be on their personal relationship with us as well. There was a sin that I kept asking God, do I address it? Do I address it? Do I address it? And he kept saying, no, just love them. Just love them. Love them like I do. And you know what? You get them filled with love, the sin goes away. And that's what happened. The sin completely changed. But had I addressed something the very first time with my truth, and not my grace, I don't know how that story would have ended up. So that's why it's so important as a Christian that you need to pray about your encounters with people. I wished I could say, here's your formula. Use it every single time. There's a cheat sheet. Works like a charm. That's not who God is. God's like, no, I want you to see that individual. And I'm going to tell you how to interact. And I'm going to tell you what kind of relationship to have with that individual. And it will be filled with grace and with truth. There's just a couple of more examples that I want to use. When Jesus is hanging on the cross, he's hanging beside two criminals. One says, I believe in you. I believe in who you are. The other just ridicules him, says stuff kind of like, if you're really the Christ, then save us. But here's grace and here's truth. Jesus looks at the one that says, I believe in you. He's a sinner. He's not just a common thief, because for you to be hung on a cross, it had to be a serious, serious crime. Otherwise, they would have just flogged you, kind of tortured you a little bit, maybe thrown you in jail for a while. But no, he's on the cross. And truth is, he deserves to be on the cross. But the guy in the middle, our Savior, truth is he's innocent, but grace says he's on the cross. So he says to the gentleman, today, you'll be with me in paradise. That was truth. But oh, was it wrapped in grace? That's what Jesus says to us. Yeah, you deserve to die. Yeah, you're a sinner. But his grace, he's going to extend to you and I, and he says, you can be with me in paradise. Another example is the woman that is caught in adultery. We won't even do the backstory on that because I have way too many questions for that one. But anyway, they catch her in the act of adultery. They grab her up, probably didn't give her time to dress, drug her through the city to where Jesus was teaching, threw her in the middle, interrupted his Bible study and his sermon, and said what was going on, and the law says, stone her. But Jesus, what do you say? Jesus' reply to them is, you who's without the first sin, cast the first stone. As the stones begin to hit the ground and they leave, Jesus asks her a question and says, where's your accusers? She looks around and says, I have none. And he says, I accuse you neither. Your sins are forgiven. Grace. Go and sin no more. Truth. In other words, stop doing what you're doing that got you in this predicament. He doesn't sugarcoat it over and say, oh, it's all right, I love you anyway. He says, I've forgiven your sins, but you need to stop doing what's destroying your soul. That's full of grace. That's full of love. So if the cross could talk, if the cross could write its story, what would the cross say to you and I and to every person that's walked the face of this earth? The cross would tell us some truth. The cross would say it's because of you that he had to die. It's because of you that he's hanging here. It's because of you that this has to be a horrible, ugly, painful, humiliating, bloody, hard, and shameful event. It's because of you. The cross is telling us the truth. But then grace. If the cross could talk, the grace would say, but how much he loves you. He doesn't deserve to be here, yet you do. Yet he, knowing your weaknesses, your evil deeds, died for you so that he could be the perfect sacrifice, so that he could spend eternity with you. And all you have to do is accept that. Oh, that's grace. See, when Jesus was hanging out with the tax collectors, with Matthew, it lets us know that he didn't care about his reputation. He'll get in the dirt with you. It doesn't matter what people think. Some people might think, well, a Savior can't reach you. And he's like, oh, watch me. Jesus was very comfortable with being misunderstood because he knew who he was. So you can't ever do a lot of work for Christ if you're always worried about what people will think, what people will say, because they have mouths and they're always going to say something. They have brains, and even though they may not be very bright, they're always going to think something. So you have to be secure in who you are in Christ, and then you've got it made. Jesus wants us to love people because he loved people. And he says, and since if you see me, you see my heavenly Father, I want them to look at you and I want them to see me. And how do I do that? Being full of grace and full of love. The cross says that you're a sinner, but you're loved so much more. The cross says that we are sinful to the point of blood needing to be shed as an atonement, and we are loved to the point that blood was shed for us. Jesus says, love like I do, full of grace, full of truth. So how do we know how to handle these personal encounters? You pray. You pray a lot. Ask and he'll lead you. Walk with Jesus and let his Spirit lead you. See, because God loves everyone the same. That's hard for me because I want him to love some people just a little bit less than he loves me, if I'm going to be real honest. And I might get in a habit of saying, God, you know, blah, 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 and you know what they did. But then I catch myself and I'm like, and I know you love them as much as you love me. So I need you to help me through this. But if you need to paddle them, here's the paddle. It's okay. Because he loves us the same. So when you see a person, don't see their sin. Don't label them automatically with their sin. Label them first with, my Savior died for them. And they need to know that. But I'm not going to shout out their sin automatically. They know their sin. They're not stupid. I don't have to tell a sinner, oh, hey, by the way, in case you didn't know, you're sinning. No, they know that. But hey, in case you didn't know, a Savior loves you. That's what they may not know. So how do I handle these encounters? We pray. Ask God to give us wisdom on how to represent him and his love. Ask God, help me to live in your truth and your grace so that I can love others. Give me a love for your people, dear Heavenly Father. Right where they are. Not where I want them to be, not where I expect them to be. Help me to love them right where they are so that they might learn who God is. So who is Jesus? Who is God? He's full of grace. He's full of truth. How will they know if we're Christians? By our love. So what should we be? Full of grace, full of truth. The ending song this morning is, he makes all things new. So man, if you've had the truth boots on most of your life and they're pretty worn out, You haven't even found your grace slippers yet. Maybe ask God to help you in the area where you need some help. But I want you to know that if you've messed up every day of your life, every moment until now, His grace can make all things new. You can start fresh. So you can decide, am I going to continue to walk in my sadness and my depression? Or am I going to focus on Him? Because see, when I focus on Him, He's the only thing that can get you out of that pit. He's the only thing that can bring you through that healing journey. So if you want to speed up this pit that you're in, take your focus off yourself. Put it on Him. And what does He want? What does He want to do in this world? Actually, because you already know your story. Aren't you tired of it? I could even tell it to you probably. And it hasn't helped you. No matter how many times you say your story, no matter how many different angles you come at it, it doesn't make it better, does it? So maybe you need to start telling a different story. I'm not saying don't acknowledge that your heart hurts, but I'm saying lean on the one that can calm the hurt. Don't turn away from Him. And don't let the enemy narrow your viewpoint so much that the only person that there's room for in that picture is you. You're going to get claustrophobic. It's not going to be a pretty picture. But if you start looking up and say, God, you know I'm broken, I'm hurt, I'm depressed, I'm scared, I'm confused, I'm angry. But God, you're the one that can help me. So I'm going to surrender it all. I'm going to surrender it all to you, and I'm going to thank you for the goodness that you've given me. I'm going to thank you that you've given me a body that I can get up out of bed. I'm thankful that you've given me eyes that I can see your beauty. I'm thankful that you give me breath in my lungs so that I can see another day, because I know my future is going to be brighter. You'll be able to feel God's presence and His comfort and His peace. So if you don't like where you've been, as he sings this song, God can make all things new. Why? Because He's full of grace and He's full of truth. God bless you.